Hello everyone, what is up? I got a random video here on the YouTube channel. Use this channel very rarely, but occasionally I just get the very random desire to record a video and just throw it up there, because why not? So today I'm going to be discussing my bookshelf, giving a little bit of a tour. Over the course of this past year, I've gotten really sort of back into reading for the first time since I was in high school, really. And even then, most of what I was reading was required reading. So this is really the first time in quite a long time that I've sort of developed a very strong passion for reading again. So yeah, I just thought I would show off what books I got on my little shelf here. It's really not a whole lot. These aren't even all the books that I own, but it's definitely the majority of them. I probably have some in storage somewhere. But yeah, just wanted to talk a little bit about what I enjoy about each of these books, and a few of these I haven't read yet. Quite a few, actually. But yeah, let's just jump into it. I got here just some little decorations for display. I got this little fake plant. This right here is a little light, like a World War II relic. I got this little solar-powered frog here, and then a little origami crane there. Yeah, it's fun to decorate the shelf. So, start out. This is mostly going to be dominated by science fiction and fantasy. I'll say that up front, because those tend to be the genres that I'm most into, and particularly right now is what I'm really into. So we'll start out. Shoot. This one's kind of jammed in there, so we'll hard to get out. We have The Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This combines every book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. I have actually only read the first one, which is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I still need to get to the rest of these sequels here, but it's really nice to have this collection here, because I can go back whenever I want. This was one of my favorite books when I was younger. Pretty formative to my tastes and my sense of humor. It's very absurd, comedic, satirical sci-fi, and it's just hilarious. It's probably some of the most that you're going to laugh out loud at a book, and it's got a lot of cool science fiction elements going on as well. This is really, I would recommend it for any reader. It's very good, no matter the age. Next here we got Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is another one of my science fiction favorites. It's a dystopian novel. I'm sure I probably don't really have to tell you what Fahrenheit 451 is about. It is just fantastic. I love Ray Bradbury's writing style. It's still one of my favorite writing styles probably that I've encountered. And it is just so evocative, so rich with metaphor, and I just absolutely love it. Has the perfect kind of ambiguity to it, where you don't exactly know what's going on, but he's using these metaphors to sort of allude to a lot of things, and it's just very evocative, thought-provoking, really makes you think about the nature of information and knowledge, and how we allow that to be spread, and how the government could potentially oppress some of that information from us in the future, and it really makes you appreciate what books are all about. So, and next here we got Hyperion. This is a fantastic science fiction novel. I read this one not too long ago. I got it from a bookstore in Seattle. First of all, it's just got a fantastic cover. It's one of my favorite book covers ever. This is a really good book. It is about a planet called Hyperion that a group of pilgrims are traveling to, and takes place in the distant future. And they're sort of traveling to this planet, and they all sort of have a different purpose for why they're going there, and it sort of dives into each of their backstories as they tell it to the other members of the crew about why they're going to this planet, because there's a whole mystery going on there. I'm not going to be spoiling any of these books. I want to keep things very vague, but it is just really interesting, fantastic world building, very good imagery and visuals, very varied. Like each individual person's character story is almost like a short story in and of itself, and it explores a pretty wide variety of genres. You got some horror elements in there. You got science fiction, of course. You have like detective. You got military sci-fi. You got more psychological stuff. It's good stuff. Speaking of psychological, this next book I have here is Solaris. This is also one of my favorite books, period, honestly. It is a science fiction novel. An incredibly sort of, if you really enjoy sort of solitary, lonely atmospheres in books, this is perfect probably for you. It really dives into a small set of characters, particularly one character, but it goes very deep into his mind, his experience going to this planet, Solaris. He is a psychiatrist, and he was recruited to go to this planet. And it's an oceanic planet, meaning the entire surface of the planet is covered by an ocean, and it begins to have very strange effects on the crew's sort of psychology. And it's very thought-provoking, really interesting. This is by a Polish author, Stanislaw Lem, so this is an English translation. From what I can tell, the translation is pretty damn good, because the writing style comes through, and I love it. Next here we have Dune, of course. Have not read this one yet, but I'm super excited to. I mean, this is a thickums. This is a big boy right here. And really excited to get to this one. This is, widely considered one of the most essential books of sci-fi to read. Apparently very rich with world building, very rich with sort of ecological themes and themes around religion, and all kinds of stuff. I really don't know a whole lot. I haven't even seen the movies. I purposely avoided watching them because I want to read the book first. But really excited to get to this one. This is an absolute sci-fi epic classic right there. So, I believe that's all the science fiction books that I have. So now we're kind of going to be transitioning into fantasy. The whole rest of the shelf is going to be fantasy. We got the Lord of the Rings. I only have The Return of the King on the shelf right now. The first two books are actually in my living room, just so I can make a little more room on the shelf here. But this is my favorite book of all time that I've read so far. That scared me. The entirety of The Lord of the Rings, if you can count it as one book, which it was originally intended to be thought of as that, my favorite book ever. It does so much. It really provides everything that I want out of a book. It has emotional impact. It has incredible, just immersive world building to really a degree that I've never seen equaled before. It's just this epic adventure and quest, and it's just peaceful. It has whimsy. It has so much warmth and heart, but it also has this darker edge to it. With Mordor and Sauron and all of that. And it is just an incredible journey that is unlike anything else. If you haven't read The Lord of the Rings, especially if you have any interest in fantasy remotely, this is sort of the fantasy book, so I absolutely gotta recommend that. And in the vein of Tolkien, we have The Hobbit. This is actually a version of The Hobbit that I got recently. I like this cover. Very, sort of vintage look to it, which is very charming. The only thing I don't like about this edition is that it doesn't have the illustrations, which is a bit of a shame, because I adore the illustrations in The Hobbit. They're just so charming. This is a perfect place to start if you want to get into fantasy. I definitely recommend reading it before you read The Lord of the Rings. It's not necessary, but I think it's a great way of easing you into that world. It's sort of a prelude to The Lord of the Rings, and it's a little lighter on the world building, a little easier to sort of get acclimated with. It is written as a children's novel, although it's far more sophisticated in terms of the writing style, I would say, than a lot of what you would probably imagine as a children's novel. So it is very good. I read this one when I was in middle school, I think, and it really had a good impact on me at that time. And let me put some of these bad boys back on the shelf, because I don't want this to all... Yeah, so we have the Silmarillion next. This is sort of what a lot of people consider the Bible of Middle-earth, of Tolkien's world that he created. Haven't read this one yet. I'm very excited to, but a little intimidated as well, because it is considered to be very dry. It's sort of told in a historical kind of phrasing. It's not as much sort of a linear, character-driven narrative in the way that Lord of the Rings is. But it seems like it's just as epic. It really sort of goes into like the creation of Middle-earth, a lot of the backstory and lore behind the world, and goes into a lot of the deeper history with like the First and Second Age, which is all stuff that I'm incredibly fascinated with. So if you read Lord of the Rings and you want to know more about that, this is the way to go. It was actually one of Tolkien's earliest works, and he worked on it throughout his entire career and never actually got to finish it before his death. So his son sort of pulled together everything that he had written for the Silmarillion and sort of polished it up and made it into this book right here. So I'll put this back on the shelf. We have another classic fantasy collection right here. This is Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a collection of the first 4 books in the series. I've yet to get to this. This is probably the next big fantasy series that I'm going to be diving into. So excited just to become more familiar with Ursula K. Le Guin as an author. She's widely considered one of the most important female authors to science fiction and fantasy. And this is a fantasy series, but she apparently has written a lot of fantastic science fiction as well. So once I read through this, definitely going to be diving into some of those books as well. Yeah, this has A Wizard of Earthsea, The Tombs of Atuan, The Farthest Shore, and Tehanu are all the books contained in this, and it is set on, really all that I know, honestly, is that it is set on this sort of very oceanic planet that is basically just scattered with a lot of islands. It doesn't even really have like a main landmass. It's just like this big archipelago. This is a very cool map right here. You gotta love a good fantasy map. And so yeah, it's just sort of scattered with all these little archipelagos and islands, and it follows a sorcerer. It involves kind of like a magic school sort of a trope, and it actually, I mean, by the time it was in this book, it wasn't even really established as a trope yet. But obviously, you know, would go on to become very popular with things like Harry Potter and stuff. But this was published in the 60s, so might have even been one of the very first fantasy books to sort of explore this idea of a magical school. And yeah, I know that it follows a wizard, and sort of as he's growing up, and it's sort of a coming-of-age sort of story. I'm just very excited. The little that I've read of Ursula K. Le Guin, just little snippets and stuff of her short stories, she just has a beautiful writing style. So yeah, that's very exciting. I'm going to actually put that back here. Next we have The Deathly Hallows, the last book in Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. Now this book, miraculously, I have actually not read. I've read every book in the Harry Potter series up until the last book. It's one of my biggest regrets in reading. I don't know why. I read through all of it when I was in middle school, shot through it, really enjoyed, honestly, every book I thoroughly enjoyed. So it wasn't even a matter of, like, not wanting to read, you know, the rest of the series, or losing interest or anything like that. It was sort of, I sort of just got hit with this period of, like, having very little energy to read in general. I think that was a time where I was getting very overwhelmed with schoolwork and all that stuff, so I kind of just dropped the series at the worst possible time, right before the epic climax. So eventually I'm going to avenge myself. I'm going to return to this book, finally finish the series. Probably just going to end up reading the whole series up until this point. and because it's Harry Potter, it's great, you know. It, you know, it's young adult fantasy. It maybe doesn't go as dive as deeply into certain themes as more adult fantasy tends to, but it just has such a sense of magic, and it's just cozy and comforting and just gives you that sense of wonder. And ultimately, I mean, that's really why I read fantasy in the first place. And by the time you get to this point in the series, things actually do get pretty intense. You know, it gets a little more serious, a little more adult and gritty as it goes on. But this cover, I absolutely love. This is actually done by the artist who illustrated the Hugo novel. It's sort of that, you know, that all graphite sort of look, and I was very keen on getting this particular edition with the green and everything. Got Harry Potter and Voldemort facing off there. So yeah, really excited to read that eventually. Not sure when I'm going to get to it, but we will see. Here I have another J.K. Rowling book. This is a little short story collection called The Tales of the Beetle and the Bard. Or The Tales of Beetle the Bard, rather. This is a really cool little collection. I've read most of the short stories in here. I think I might have actually read all of them. Probably by now I've sort of just jumped around between the different stories. Maybe one or two of them I haven't gotten to yet. But it's cool. It's illustrated, has these little illustrations by J.K. Rowling, just like little headers and just little illustrations like that. Let me see if I can find. They're very quaint, very cute, and yeah, here's another one. What I remember is just a very nice collection of just kind of silly little magical tales that are sort of supposed to be these sort of children's stories that are told within the world of Harry Potter and spread among wizards. And yeah, it's cool. I got that for Easter one year. Next, we're going to be getting into the Kingkiller Chronicle series, which is one of my favorite series of all time. We're going to start with the first book in it, The Name of the Wind. This book, when I read it, absolutely impacted me on such a deep level. I just adored it. It was an easy 5 stars for me, a very strong 5 stars. I can't recommend this book enough. It's a bit divisive in the fantasy space. People either seem to love it or just really not like it. Some people are very passionate about not liking it, and I can understand why. There are elements. The protagonist tends to be sort of the most divisive elements for people. People are not. Some people just really do not gel with his personality. I personally loved it. Thought he was an incredibly interesting character. This story follows a sort of frame narrative about this wizard in this world, which is called the Four Corners of Civilization. Got a little map in there. He's named Kavoth, and he's one of the most infamous wizards in this world. And where the book starts out, he has sort of like faked his death. The general populace doesn't believe that he is still alive, and he is sort of assuming this role as a humble innkeeper at this inn in the middle of nowhere, a very rural area. And he's going by a different alias. He's going by Coat instead of Kvoth. And a character comes along known as the Chronicler, who is, one of the most renowned scribes in this world. And he has discovered that Kvoth is living here, and he is assuming this persona that is not him. And he convinces him to tell him his story. So the majority of the book is in first person. And it is him sort of just telling his own story, how he came to become the powerful wizard that he did, or arcanist, as they're referred to in this series. And it's just a beautiful coming-of-age story. It goes so far beyond being just a good fantasy novel. It is genuinely just the emotional impact. It's so strong. The connection with the characters, the world building is just so immersive and realistic. It has this sense of realism to it. Like you could really just walk right into that world. Yet it still has a lot of very fantastical elements, which of course I love. It scratches that itch of having a lot of magic and things like that. But it's sort of set in this backdrop of a world that is very believable and sort of grounded in itself in a very strong way. And it is just, it's a little more on the slow pace side, you know. It really sort of lets you soak in these scenes, and that's not going to be for everyone, you know. If you're really about constant action and sort of a story that feels like it's always, you know, progressing at a very, you know, steady pace, very consistent pace, this might not be for you. You know, it's exploring a character's life, so it goes into every aspect of that. I personally found it to be very captivating the whole way through. Honestly, very good, consistent pace, you know, at least medium pace all the way through. It didn't really feel like it dragged at all. But, you know, it goes throughout all periods of his life. And this first book, The Name of the Wind, primarily covers, like, from when he was a child to around 16 or 17. And the next book in the series, he continues to grow up. And it is just, it's so good. It's kind of hard to put into words how much I love this book. Probably my second favorite book, honestly, that I've read to The Lord of the Rings. And so far, still got a lot to read. So, you know, who knows what will happen, but can't recommend this enough. And then here we have the second book in the Kingkiller Chronicle, The Wise Man's Fear. Patrick Rothfuss is the author. I guess I forgot to mention that. This book develops on the first one in such a good way. I think it is a fantastic sequel. May not like it on quite the same height that I do The Name of the Wind, but it's extremely close. And honestly, there are things about this book that I think it does better than the first book. Some of the highs are possibly even higher highs than The Name of the Wind. And it's longer, you know, so maybe it meanders a little bit more. That might be my only sort of minor gripe with it. But it is just a fantastic book. It brings in a lot more, expands on the world a lot more, brings in a lot more magical, fantastical elements, which I'm all for. And really builds on Kvothe as a character, and it's just touching. And I could find so much to relate to in it. Not to mention the writing style is beautiful. That's one of the things you hear people discuss most about Patrick Rothfuss as an author is his prose. And you can certainly see why when you read it, because it is just, it's magnificent, really. Just so poetic and rich and beautiful without being too over the top or flowery. And still managing to be very readable for the large majority of people, I would say. So next, I'm actually going to go into, this is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. This is the first book in the Wheel of Time series. I have not read this yet. This is the first of a 14-book series. So, very long, very beefy, epic fantasy series. I mean, this is, you know, considered one of the classics of fantasy. I've heard that it's, you know, incredible, that it reaches some of the highest highs that the genre has ever produced, and really sort of builds on what Tolkien did in a really fantastic way. So I'm so excited to get around to reading this. I just don't know when I'm going to start it. I just found the first book in a thrift store randomly for very cheap. I got it for like $2. I was like, I'm just going to pick this up. And it's the only book I have in the series. I don't want to buy any more until I end up reading this one and sort of decide whether I want to continue with the series or not. But I'm sure I will. Yeah. Can't really recommend this one or not because I haven't read it, but from what I've heard, if you like epic fantasy with just crazy, sweeping stories, world building, with characters that are developed over a very long period of time, over many books. Just a world you can get completely lost in. This is the way to go, right here. Whoops. This is a Harry Potter wand that I got. I think this is Newt Scamander's wand from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. So I just like to use that as a little display piece next to the fantasy here. Now this is the first book in another fantasy series called Malazan, Book of the Fallen. This one I also found at a thrift store for very cheap, so I picked it up. This one, probably going to be a pretty long time before I dive into this series, honestly, because this is sort of considered some of the most challenging epic fantasy that you can dive into. It's 10 books, so it's not as many books as The Wheel of Time, but apparently the world building is just on an even greater scale, and it's just jam-packed with all kinds of information that it just throws at you about this world, and apparently it can be very overwhelming for somebody who is into well-read in fantasy, so I want to give it some more time reading other fantasy books before I dive into this. But it's supposed to be one of the best ever done, so I'm very excited, to say the least, to eventually get to Malazan, Book of the Fallen. Yeah. If any of you guys have read some of these book series, please let me know what you think in the comments. Yeah, and then next here, I'm actually going to go into... we got Brandon Sanderson right at the end here. This is... We'll start with the Mistborn trilogy. We got the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, which is just called Mistborn or Mistborn, The Final Empire. This is a very fresh read for me. I actually just finished reading this book yesterday, and I really loved it. It was a very fun book. This is about... it's modern fantasy. I should mention Name of the Wind is also modern fantasy. So very sort of distinct from a lot of classic fantasy that you get with things like Lord of the Rings or even The Wheel of Time. Also forgot to mention, this trilogy has yet to be complete, and it might never end up getting complete. There's supposed to be one more book left to come out, but it's been like 13, 14 years maybe, which is very unfortunate. I'm trying to accept that we might never get a conclusion to the series, and honestly I would be okay with that because the books are so worth reading on their own. It's such a good journey, but also I'm so eager to get a conclusion. So hopefully that'll happen eventually, but we'll see. This, though, Mistborn, is first book in a trilogy, and it's sort of around this concept of what if the Dark Lord won. What if Voldemort won? What if Sauron won and sort of corrupted this world and took it over, took control. And this is a heist story, so it's this hero rose up against an evil Dark Lord, basically, and they lost, and the Dark Lord took over and reigned for 1,000 years, and it's this immortal emperor called the Lord Ruler, and there is a team of thieves that devised this heist to overthrow his empire, and it is really fun. It is epic. Again, really cool world building. It's set in this really cool world. It's almost like if Mordor in the Lord of the Rings was like an entire planet, if a whole planet became Mordor. So, you got ash that comes down from the sky. Everything's covered, like blackened and covered in ash. There's these mists that come out in the nighttime. There's sort of these Gothic spires, that's sort of the architectural style going on. Lots of stained glass. It's really cool. It really just very visual. It puts you in this world. It includes this really cool magic system, which is what this author, Brandon Sanderson, is known for, is doing the very complex, hard magic systems, which basically just means the magic works in a very systematic, almost scientific sort of way, where it has very clear limitations, and the way that it works is very like, sort of, you know, it's not nebulous, like, sort of magic in The Lord of the Rings might be, which would be considered more soft magic. You know, it has more distinct rules to it, and this just has an incredible magic system. It's called allomancy. It has to do with swallowing metals and burning them in your system that create different effects. And it even has a little allomantic chart in the back here, which is very handy. Shows you what the different metals are used for. So yeah, Brandon Sanderson is, you know, considered one of the best authors in the fantasy genre right now. This is all I've read from him so far, so I'm really excited to dive deeper. Really excited to get into the sequels in this trilogy, The Well of Ascension, and lastly, The Hero of Ages. So that should be lots of fun. Definitely recommend at least that first book. If you're a fan of a good heist story, or if you just want to get into modern fantasy, it's a really good entryway. It's very readable. And then here we have the first book in the Stormlight Archive, which is sort of considered Brandon Sanderson's magnum opus epic fantasy series. This right here is a cinder block of a book, an absolute cinder block. I actually bought this book a long time ago, probably a year ago at this point, but I haven't gotten around to reading it because I sort of bought this when I hadn't read anything by this author. Really, all I had read in fantasy was Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit at that point. But I saw it at the bookstore, and I was like, I want to read that. I've read about it a lot online. It just seems like such a cool book. But I'm going to give it some more time before I dive into it, just because it is quite a commitment. There's currently 5 books out in this series, and there's another 5 planned to come out. And, you know, kind of wanted to ease my way in with Mistborn. A lot of people consider that a better starting point for this author. But it also has one of my favorite covers. I absolutely love this cover. It just has such a classic sort of 90s fantasy feel, very colorful and just sweeping and epic. It's set on this planet where this sort of rocky desert-like planet, which almost feels sort of science fiction in a way. And I believe this book actually did take influence from Dune, which makes a lot of sense. And there are these gigantic magical storms that sweep across the landscape every few days. And so a big aspect of the world building is that these cultures have to adapt in order to withstand these storms that happen so regularly. Even the wildlife has sort of evolved to withstand it, where you get these very, like, almost crustacean-like life forms that have developed with these very hard shells that can resist the incredibly powerful storms. You get plant life that retracts into the ground when these storms come out, which just seems so cool. I'm just so fascinated by that. It's also full of illustrations. I'm not going to look at any here because I don't really want any spoilers, but, you know, it's got maps. This is a map of the entire planet. Just seems very sweeping and epic. Another little smaller map there, like a more zoomed in area of the world. So that is one of my most anticipated reads. Considering how much I'm enjoying Mistborn so far, I think pretty safe to say that's going to be a really fun time. Now, we're going to move on to some other genres for a little bit here. That's most of the fantasy that I have there. Let's actually get a little bit into some nonfiction here. This right here is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Sorry if I haven't been naming a lot of the authors behind these books. Hopefully you can at least see them on the book, so if you want to know. So this is Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. I haven't read this yet, but I'm really excited to. It's a beautiful hardcover. I forgot I have a 4-leaf clover in the front, pressed in the front of the book here. That's pretty cool. But yeah, it just goes into Native American wisdom, spirituality, into sort of how integrated and connected with nature they can be, and that is a theme that is very intriguing to me. So I'm excited to read this. It seems like it could really just be very moving and just make me appreciate the nature and the world around me that much more. So yeah, very excited to read this. I got this from a friend who recommends it very strongly. Another book, kind of following in with the nature theme. Just got this one recently, haven't read it yet. This is The Overstory by Richard Powers. This is a book about trees. One of the quotes on the back here calls it an eco-epic. I don't know exactly know what that means, but I'm intrigued. So it's a big old book about ecology and about nature and trees. Really, that's all that I know. But I love trees. I love nature. It is a fiction story, I believe, so it does follow characters and everything. But yeah, really don't know what it's about beyond that, besides that it's just got a very pretty cover. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into that. Next here we got, this is actually a very cute little picture book here. It's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. This is a super quick read. I mean, most of these pages only have a handful of words, sentences on them. But even though it's targeted towards children, I would recommend anybody read this. It's just full of just very sweet, inspiring quotes and very charming sort of ink illustrations. There's sort of a range of art styles going on. Some of them have more like fountain pen, sort of calligraphy type look to them. You got some watercolor in there. You got just black and white. I think there might even be some pastel or maybe charcoal illustrations in there. It's just about this boy and a mole, a fox, and a horse sort of going on these little adventures, and it talks about friendship and goes into all of those themes, and it's just very sweet book, and it really I can recommend to anyone. Now we got a couple of magical realism books here. First one is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I've yet to read this, but very excited to get around to it. This is, honestly, I don't know a whole lot about it, which was on purpose. I want to keep it fresh for when I get around to reading this. But I know that it's magical realism, so it's, sort of based on our world, realistic in a lot of ways, but it ties in these dreamlike sort of magical elements in there in a more subtle way. But yeah, I know that it explores childhood and sort of the imagination of a child and how you can sort of create these worlds out of seemingly insignificant things. And that just seems like the kind of thing I would really dig. It seems like a pretty quick read too, so it's a standalone as well. So I'll need to just pick this one up and knock it out soon. And we got a couple of books here by the Japanese author Haruki Murakami. These are the only two books I've read by him so far, but I'm very eager to dive deeper into his bibliography because I really like his books from what I've read so far. The first one I'm going to cover, this is the first one I read, is Norwegian Wood. This is sort of a romance, slice of life, nostalgia, drama, or whatever you want to call it. That was a very clunky way of describing it. But it follows a college student living in Tokyo in the 1980s, and he sort of had, it goes into his life and sort of these relationships that he has, some of the traumas that he's dealt with, some of the traumas that his loved ones have dealt with. It's a really moving, beautiful book, but it's heavy, It's got some heavy scenes in there, but that's one of the things I like about it. It feels like a very holistic sort of representation of life, with highs and lows, darks and lights, and all of that. Um, but it's very moving. This actually isn't even really magical realism. This author is known for doing magical realism. This is a pretty straight up, just realistic fiction sort of book. But it's very psychological. Really explores sort of themes of nostalgia and love, friendship, um, depression, all of that. And it's just a good book about life. Definitely recommend that one. Then we have Kafka on the Shore. I read this one not too long ago. This book gets a lot weirder than Norwegian Wood, I will say that. A lot more magical, surreal elements going on. If you like David Lynch, I would recommend this book. This book almost is like David Lynch in literary form. It is so strange. It's so weird. Definitely probably the weirdest book I've ever read. But it's so fascinating. I don't know how this man writes the books that he does. It's just, going into the book, you wouldn't necessarily anticipate how weird it was going to get, but there are just so many left turns. You never really know what's going to happen. It is just fascinating. I don't even really know a pitch to give for this book because I just feel like it wouldn't even begin to describe it. It follows a kid living in Tokyo, I believe, who basically he's a runaway. He runs away from his father, who he lives with, and decides that he's just going to take a subway off to another city in Japan and just live on his own. And shit gets crazy. I will say that. It's really weird. Definitely some trigger warnings for this book. It's got some very upsetting scenes. One of the scenes in particular, I had to kind of skim through because it was just a little too much for me in a certain specific kind of way. But I'm very glad that I ended up following through with the book because it ended up being a fantastic read on the whole, despite having some very upsetting scenes. But they have a purpose. They serve a role in the story. So as long as you know that going in, I think you'll really enjoy it. Yeah, great author, Haruki Murakami. Next, we have Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. I haven't read this book in a long time. I actually read this for school, and I really enjoyed it when I did read it. This is a autobiography of Trevor Noah. He used to host The Daily Show, if you're familiar with him. I like Trevor Noah a lot. He's a funny guy. He doesn't host The Daily Show anymore. Not exactly sure what he's up to these days, actually, but he's a stand-up comedian as well. He's very funny. And this sort of just goes into his childhood, what it was like growing up in South Africa during apartheid, and all the difficulties that came with that, everything that he dealt with, being somebody of mixed race. And it is just a really good look into sort of the politics of that, what it's like growing up in that kind of environment and dealing with that. And so it deals with a lot of the darker aspects of that, but it also is sort of just shot through with this optimism. If you've seen Trevor Noah's comedy, you know how he can turn anything into a lighthearted, funny, he can make a joke out of anything, basically. So it is overall a very optimistic read, and he really manages to make light of a lot of things. And it's a moving story, and I really enjoyed it. I'd actually like to go back and read this one, because it has been a long time. Next, we got The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I love this book. This book really impacted me at the time that I initially read it. It's a coming-of-age story, sort of in the vein, if you've read The Catcher in the Rye and you enjoyed that book, I personally love that book. It's not for everyone. A lot of people hate it. I can understand why. This is sort of in that it's almost, you could say, a modern version of The Catcher in the Rye, but I also wouldn't say that if you didn't like Catcher in the Rye, it doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't like this one, because the main character is very different, a lot more Colvin Caulfield, is that his name? Holden Caulfield, rather. Uh, he's a difficult character. He's a complex character, but he, in many ways, is very unlikable. That tends to be what turns people off about that. Whereas I would say the main character, who I believe is named Charlie in this book, yeah, is just a lot more likable up front. He's a very sympathetic character. He's very shy, but I think a lot of people that were a little more extroverted, a little more of an outsider growing up would find a lot to relate to in this book. I certainly did. I thought it was just a really moving story. This cover is based on the movie, which I'm not a huge fan of. I just don't tend to like book covers that are based on film adaptations, but it is a good movie, though. I do certainly recommend the movie. I do like the book better, though, I will say. Yeah, I would recommend this to anyone, honestly. It's great, even though it's been a long time since I've read it. Here we have a couple of books in the music series 33 and a Third. I have actually yet to read these. I need to get around to it, but I'm really excited to. These cover the albums EXO by Elliott Smith and Pink Moon by Nick Drake, which are two of my all-time favorite albums. And so, of course, I'm going to love these books if they're talking about some of my favorite albums. It goes, from what I can tell, goes pretty deep into the sort of creation process of these albums. The writing, the recording process, the creative choices behind it, and then also I think does some more subjective analysis on top of that of sort of the lyrics and what the songs were about, things like that. But yeah, this seems like a great series. They cover a ton of different classic albums, and sort of do a deep dive into them. By the way, if you haven't listened to either of these albums, please do. I highly recommend them. Good stuff. Next here, we have A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. Haven't read this one yet. I think this is actually going to be the next book that I read. Probably going to start it within the next couple of days. My mom recommended this book to me. She said it's one of her all-time favorites, and really wanted me to read it. And we tend to have pretty similar tastes in things, so I'm sure I will enjoy it. This is a coming-of-age story as well. If you couldn't tell, I tend to like coming-of-age stories. I don't know why. I just think I can find a lot to relate to in them. And, yeah, they make me feel understood a little bit. I honestly know very little about this book, other than that it centers around a character named Owen Meany, who is a very sort of eccentric boy, very, just neurodivergent. Let's be honest, from what I've heard, he's probably, likely on the spectrum or something like that. I don't know if the book itself really addresses that or acknowledges that, but he's just this very, very sort of honest character. I've only read a couple of small excerpts from it, but I immediately love Owen Meany. He just seems like such a likable character. The way that his lines of dialogue are written, they're always in all caps, as you can see right there, which is pretty funny. It sort of conveys his tone, his delivery is just very, expressive and out there. Apparently, though, this is just a very heartwarming book. It explores themes around religion, Christianity, what it's like to live in the country, in rural areas. It just seems like a very humble sort of honing in on a smaller aspect of American life and what it's like to grow up in that. And I tend to really enjoy those kinds of books. So, yeah, I am excited to read that. And as somebody who's autistic, maybe I'll find a lot to relate to in it. So, this right here is not exactly a book, but it's a Pantone little color palette flip book, I guess you could say. So, it's got a bunch of different color palettes, actual like Pantone, warm earth, campfire, deep autumn. This is pretty cool. This would be a good sort of reference for if you wanted to paint a house or something and just pick like a good sort of color scheme to have, or even just for art, in general. You could even go to Home Depot, get one of these scanned, if you wanted one of these exact colors. But yeah, I just think as somebody who enjoys color theory, I just think that's very cool. And mainly I just like how it looks as a display piece on the shelf. So yeah, I got another little decoration. This was a clay Harry Potter goblet that I made back in middle school. Fortunately, a piece of it broke off, but I like that as a little sort of display piece. It's a little crude, but I was in middle school. Give me a break. It's got the Hogwarts H on it. Now, these are the remainder of my books. So we got a couple more fantasy adjacent sort of books here. I guess you could say these three are like dark fantasy. This right here is Vermis. This book is incredible. If you don't know about Vermis, I will tell you now. It is a fictionalized... It is a little hard to describe. It is... The whole concept behind it is, what if there was a instruction manual or like a manual to a video game that does not exist? So, it's called Vermis, Lost Dungeons, and Forbidden Woods. And the idea is that there's this sort of mysterious, dark fantasy RPG game called Vermis, and this is like the guidebook for it. But the game does not exist. So when you read through it, it kind of makes you imagine what the game would actually be like. And it's so cool. It's just filled with incredible artwork, super just evocative artwork. Very RPG-ish, like it has like sort of your character alignment. Do you pick the good or the evil? These are, like different states that you can be afflicted with. Infection, dread, slumber, petrification. You got like your character select. It's just in this really cool... That's upside down. Really cool, gritty sort of dreamlike kind of art style. Here you got some of your character screen, with different stats and stuff. Strength, intelligence, faith, will. It's got various information about these characters. And then you kind of move into the story itself, if you can really call it a story. It kind of goes into these different environments that you pass through. And it's just loaded with awesome artwork and, scary, horror-inspired, fantastical creatures that you encounter, and monsters, and, NPCs that you talk to, magical rings and artifacts that you acquire. This is just pure dark fantasy world building. If you love horror, if you love things like Dark Souls, or Bloodborne, Elden Ring, this is probably going to be right up your alley. It is awesome. I absolutely loved this book, even though it's more so of an art book, not really a traditional narrative or even a traditional graphic novel. It is just so enthralling and imaginative, and it really just makes you imagine in such vivid detail what this world would be like. The art style is just awesome, very vintage, retro inspired. Highly recommend this. The only way to buy it, you might be able to find it at a bookstore, if you're lucky, but buying it directly from the artist Plastibu online is the way to go. Let's see here. Continuing with the dark fantasy theme, we have Berserk. This is the first book in the Berserk manga series. I have read this, but I have not continued further with the series as of yet, although I definitely intend to at some point because I really enjoyed this. This is very dark, very gritty fantasy. This was very formational to a lot of dark fantasy that came down the line. Things like Dark Souls actually took great influence from Berserk. This was pretty early on when it came to sort of the modern ideas around dark fantasy. Just a lot of crazy like monster designs and kind of body horror going on. The artwork is just awesome. We got some undead here that the protagonist is fighting. Just really cool. This is really just the very beginning of the story. I think there are a lot of volumes in the series, like 70 or something, maybe even over 100 at this point. I'm not really sure. So this is really just setting up the main character Guts and exploring, just kind of introducing you to the world and the characters. But it's really enjoyable, even just on its own. Though, yeah, I would certainly like to go further and see what actually happens with the story, because I hear it only gets better and better. You get some of these full page spreads where it's just one giant piece of artwork, and I think that's awesome. This is just great. If you love dark fantasy, horror, that's essential right there. And then we're going to go into my Stephen King books. I only have 3 of them, but I definitely want to get more Stephen King. First one is Fairy Tale. I have not read this book yet. My girlfriend got this for me, so thank you to my girlfriend. But I'm really excited to read this. This is one of Stephen King's explorations into fantasy. And obviously very influenced by fairy tales. And yeah, it's got a little quote from Guillermo del Toro here, the director that did Pan's Labyrinth. If you haven't seen that movie, highly recommend it. That makes a lot of sense because he does the sort of dark, creepy fairy tale sort of Brothers Grimm type of thing. And this being Stephen King, I'm sure that's exactly what it's going to be. I know it starts out set in our world, and it has to do with this boy that discovers a portal to, some kind of fairy realm. And apparently it's just very surreal and creepy and strange in Stephen King fashion. So I'm really excited to read that. This also has illustrations throughout it, which is very cool. I think it's just like chapter headers. Not very common for Stephen King that you get illustrations, so this is the first page here. Got a little house there. Yeah, very excited to read that. Continuing with Stephen King, we have Salem's Lot. I read this one very recently. This is fantastic. This is my favorite Stephen King book that I've read so far, even though I've only read 2 of them. If you do not know about Salem's Lot, I don't want to spoil it. I want to keep, information as minimal as possible, but it's about vampires. I'm sure most people know that already. It's about vampires, and it covers this town called Jerusalem's Lot in Maine. It's a fictional town, and one of the things I was very surprised about with this book is how broad the scope of it is. There's so many character perspectives that it covers throughout the book, and just dives really deep into the minds of residents living all around Jerusalem's Lot. And, it centers mainly on a few core characters, but it really gives you a very broad sense of this sort of small town, what the atmosphere of it is, what the sort of underbelly, all the dark things going on beneath the surface in this town. Pretty freaky stuff, and it is really good. I was very impressed with how well Stephen King was able to just jump around between so many different character viewpoints while still managing to make the story feel very, tied together overall. It's just very creepy, very just great, atmosphere, tension, suspense. Stephen King is really good at setting the tone for that kind of thing, in my opinion. It's got great, subtle more psychological horror in there. It's got very sort of in-your-face physical horror as well. So, I mean, if you're a horror fan, you probably like Stephen King. Maybe not. If you don't, that's fine too. But if you like horror and you haven't read Stephen King, I mean, can't recommend it enough. Another Stephen King book. This is his first book, Carrie. I read this one a pretty long time ago. I think I was a freshman in high school. So I honestly don't remember a lot about it. But I remember really enjoying it. I didn't like it quite as much as Salem's Lot. But, it's his first book, so what do you expect? Of course, he's only going to continue to improve. But this is still a classic story. It follows a character named Carrie who develops these telekinetic powers. And it's very freaky, explores a lot of ideas around religion and trauma and abuse, things like that. So, again, probably would give a trigger warning for this as well. Probably for most Stephen King, honestly. But I think most would expect that going into a horror book. But yeah, this is good. This is a good book. I'd like to go back and reread it at some point. Here we have a couple of collections here, short stories from Edgar Allan Poe. I love Edgar Allan Poe. This was one of my favorite authors that we sort of dove into when I was a middle school student. I remember we read Telltale Heart, and it freaked me out so much. It literally kept me up at night after we read it. But I was really enthralled by it as much as it did freak me out. Since then, I've read a lot more of his short stories, and I just really enjoy. I mean, it's pretty incredible how well these stories hold up, even though they were written in the 1800s. Or at least a lot of them were. Not sure exactly when he died, but yeah, I mean, he's sort of the father of horror, you could say, of Gothic horror. It's just great. Telltale Heart, Fall of the House of Usher, The Pendulum. Those would probably be some of my favorites from Edgar Allan Poe. The Mask of Red Death. This book also has that in it. I think both of these have a lot of overlap in terms of the stories that are in them. Really cool, just very vintage covers as well. These are old right here. I got these from my parents. Last book that we have here. I haven't read this one all the way through. This is The Lost Cause of Bleak Creek by Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. Yes, Link Neal, Rhett and Link of Good Mythical Morning, wrote a horror novel, which is really cool. I guess this is the point that I stopped out. I guess I read about a third of the way into this one before I put it down. Oh wow, there's a quote from Jimmy Fallon on the back. Isn't that something? Yeah, I remember enjoying what I read, but, it didn't completely suck me in. I absolutely love Rhett and Link, but, I don't know how... how experienced they are as authors. Not very, of course. They've only written, I think, a couple of books. This might be even the only fiction book that they've read. But I was pretty impressed as a debut novel from what I read. I did enjoy it. It's kind of based on their childhood. So I believe the two main characters in this, their names aren't Rhett and Link. It's like Rex and Leaf or something. So their names are like kind of similar, and it's like clearly inspired by them, but sort of alternate version of them. Rhett and Link grew up in a town in South Carolina called Bowie's Creek, I think. So Bleak Creek is based on Bowie's Creek, basically just a creepy horror version of it, which is a really cool idea, kind of doing an alternate version of your life. But yeah, I might need to go back, check this out again, read through the whole thing, see what I think of it. But yeah, that's pretty much all the books I have here. I got a couple more things on display. Got my Polaroid camera, a few cassettes. I got 9 Inch Nails, Pretty Hate Machine, and Downward Spiral, and then Tears for Fears, The Hurting on cassette. Those are all great albums. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you have watched at this point, I just realized how long this video is. So appreciate it. Appreciate you tuning in. Might end up doing a follow-up to this at some point if I end up expanding my book collection to any considerable degree. Really excited to dive into a lot of the books that I have here. I need to get into the habit of reading the books that I own before I end up buying more books. So I probably need to just give myself a cutoff and just read what I have before I buy any more. But I love reading. I hope you do too. Hopefully some of these books I mentioned here seem interesting to you and you might want to check them out. Yeah, thank you for tuning in, and happy reading. I will see you guys later, which might be anywhere from a couple months from now to a couple years from now. We will see. But in any case, thank you.